Right. Let's try this again. So, devlog 1.5, I guess. So I tried doing this last night, and it didn't go well because I started rambling on a lot. I was like winding down at the end of the day, whatever. I was half asleep. I'm an old man. Um. Anyways, how to make a good, solid, dynamic inventory. It's gonna be complicated. I'm gonna try to keep it very short because the last one was like an hour long and it was just like all over the place. Uh, I'm gonna try to keep this one short, and I'm just gonna get to the point, and then I'm gonna show you all the events. So don't worry if you don't understand what I'm saying. You can just look at the events, or you can just copy paste it. And as long as you don't need to alter it and make it different, you'll be okay. You just need to copy it. So, anyways, inventories. There's a few kinds, right? The static kinds. I gave the example, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, right? Where you press a button and it goes zoom, and it shows up all the items, and the items show up in the predetermined place, and you just need to discover them or have them. Dynamic ones, the more like updatey ones, I don't know, the ones that change in front of you as you're using them instead of just like deleting and or like hiding, showing, whatever. Actually moving. That's what I meant. Words, hard, morning. Um, those are hard, and this is what I mean. So I'm gonna press a button, and items are gonna show up because I'm gonna tell the game that I have the items. Actually, I'm gonna close it, right? Let's pretend we just picked up an item. Right. Press the button. I got the item. There's the items. Now, if I click on this one, this item is gonna change place. Something's gonna happen, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Like, you could delete the item, you could equip the item, whatever. The issue is what happens to the rest of the items. So I'm gonna use this one. I just equipped it. It changed places, and these ones moved. This one didn't. Let's say I use this one in the middle. These ones are gonna go down one. These ones are gonna stay in place. Cool, right? If I use this one's gonna go to the end. Right? If I use this one, to the end. And so on. So it doesn't matter. It keeps the order, stays in order. This is the basis for a good inventory when it comes to stuff like this, like items and stuff, equipping. You can use this for anything. So instead of going to these slots, because there's slots in the back, right? I'm going to show you all of that. So instead of going here, I could have like slots that is like for the helm, for the sword, for the shield, and I can make them go there and have it so that only one item can occupy that space, that sort of stuff. You can alter it to do that. And this is the basis for it. And the coding behind this, like the programming, is solid. This will not break. Right? You can do it as fast as you want, slow as you want, whatever order. It will not break. I made sure of that. This was like 3 days of work. Like working out how to make this incredibly solid and not have any bugs. I worked out all that stuff. Right. So here's the other thing. Does it stay in memory? Yes. So if I close it, reopen, exactly where you left everything. You close all the way, go back all the way, where you left it. If you change the scene completely, if you do that, same scene, but whatever, we changed it. We actually used the change scene thing. There it is. Because everything is being stored in memory. So, what's happening? When we're not looking at the layer, the items don't exist. Like, it stays in... By the way, we're using the GDevelop inventory system. You cannot use it, and you'll need a variable that says that you have this item, and a variable that says this item is equipped. If you don't want to use the GDevelop thing. I started using the GDevelop thing because it's a global thing. it stores stuff in memory and stores stuff globally, which is great. I didn't know it did that. So I started using that just to like make less variables, because it was getting messy, right? And basically, the GDevelop inventory thing makes the variables for you, right? You just don't see them on paper, but it's making the variables on the back, like in memory. So it's cool to use. Anyways, so you pick up the item, right? And you tell the game, either through your own variable or through the GDevelop inventory thing, add the item to this thing, variable or specific inventory. This part should be easy, right? The item is still not created because it only creates items when we're actually looking at that layer. All of this stuff is in layers on different scenes, right? Every scene has the same layers. That's why this works across the scenes. Sorry. So when I press the button and I show up the armory, that's when we're going to create the items. Now, when you create the item, right, you picked up the item, you open the thing, the game created the item. Before creating the item, it checks, right, do you have the item? And is the item not equipped? Or is it equipped? That's the distinction between these two, right? It's like we're using two different inventories. If it's not equipped, it checks. Is it in memory? Yes or no? If it's not in memory, then it's going to create a new one. And if it's not in memory, it's going to add to this variable that keeps track of everything, which is the ID. So the ID goes from like 0 to 1, right? Then creates the item, and then it prints that ID onto the item on an object variable that we call ID. So you make the item, it tallies 1, then it tells the item, okay, you're number 1, you go on the number 1 slot. The item now knows on an object variable, it goes, oh, I'm number 1, I go on the number 1 slot, right? But then we need to store that in memory. So we have a different variable that's specific to that item that you put whatever number he is onto that variable, right? And this all updates all the time whenever you're looking at this screen. If you're not looking at that screen, it stops updating because we delete all the items when we're not showing. Let me show that in the background. I have this thing. It's keeping track of where everything is. It's only tracking the bottom half because I was lazy to do both of them. Anyways, we're going to use just the bottom half. And all this stuff like wooden shield is number 4. WS number 4. That's it. Number 4 slot. MB is molten blade. Yeah, number 2. Number 2 slot. This one doesn't have it because I made it at the end of the last video. It doesn't matter. SP means star pendant. That's a 5. It's on the 5 slot, right? These are the object variables. These are the variables holding the ticket, right? They were passed on a ticket that said their number. So they're holding it on, right? And they're like, okay, I'm number 5. So I go to number 5. And they're constantly telling their memory, their partner, that they're number 5. For example, the star pendant. SP. These ones, the ones that end with a V, these are the memories. So SPV 5. He's constantly reminding this guy, like, I'm number 5. Remind me later when I need it. So when we use an item, it checks the numbers. If the numbers are less, then they stay the same. If the ticket that they're holding, the number is less than the one they're holding, it does nothing. It remains the same. If it's bigger, then it subtracts 1 from the object ID, the object variable, right? And then the objects go, oh, dude, I went down one, and reminds the memory again that he went down one. So now SPV, start pendant variable, 4 instead of 5. If I use this one, now he's number 3, and he's going to remind the thing, like, dude, I'm number 3, remind me later. That's what's happening. That's what's happening, right? When we close it, it stops updating. Like, all the bottom ones just went to 0. And that's because we just deleted all the items. I made it this way, so I was sure that when you changed the scene or when you did anything, it stayed in memory. So everything went to 0 because we deleted the items. And if the items don't exist, their object variables do not exist, meaning there's 0. You need to make them stop updating their global variables. Because if they were updating right now, they'd say, oh, dude, we're 0. So when you recreated them, they would go to 0, right? They would start again. That's not what you want, right? Sorry, just hit the microphone. Anyways, so we're going to close this. When we reopen it, it's going to check again. And it's going to check this time, like, is the item equipped? Is the item, do you have the item, or is the item equipped? It's going to check this, right? To know if it's going to go on the top half or the bottom half. But then it's also going to check, does this item already have a ticket in memory? Like, does it have a position in memory? If it doesn't, if it's 0, then it's going to create a new one, and it's going to add to the initial ID, keeping the whole thing going. If it already has an ID, like if it has something in memory, then it's just going to recreate the item. It's going to remind the item by making the object ID variable the same as the one in memory, but it's not going to add to the tally variable. So that's why you're not hearing the thing noise, these noises, because these noises only happen when the main variables are adding and subtracting. When it's just the object variables moving, it doesn't. Right. So I hope that made sense. That was my best explanation. So now, if that doesn't make sense, oh, one more thing, right? This is the cool stuff. So, sorting. You're like, okay, but stuff is always like, I can't move it, like I can't drag and drop to put where I want. Like, how do I sort things? It's easy. That's the easy part. You just reset the whole thing. You put it in a button that just clears the whole thing. I'm going to show you how. And you press the button. And there you go. It goes on to a predetermined order. Like, whatever order you made the items in the events, that's what it's going to show. So you can always sort the items. Press of a button. This is really easy. Like, it doesn't matter. It works in both of them at the same time, right? So let's put that there. So the hat shows up last, and I don't know the order, whatever. I'm going to press the button, and it's going to sort both of them. There you go. Right? I'm going to show you how to do that. That part's really easy. You just reset the whole thing, delete everything, and then recreate everything. Right. So everything gets stored in memory, everything, whatever. It's pretty solid. So let's start. What exactly do you need? So the items aren't just going in the middle of air. They're going to go onto their slots. Each slot, this is a layer, by the way. This is the layer you're looking at. Each slot is an individual object. So slot 0, slot 1, slot 2, slot 3, they need to be different. You can't just copy paste these. They need to be different, have a different name, hopefully in a way that you can identify the order so you can tell the object where to go. And like you see, it's like we have two different inventories, one for the bottom half, slots 1, 2, 3, and then slots for the top half, 1, 2, 3, and so on. I can just call these EQ because it's like we're equipping stuff. It's so I can keep track of stuff. So you need the slots, individual ones. Remember the names 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the order you want them to go to. Then obviously you need the items. You need to create your own items in as global items, and I make my slots are 64 by 64 because my items are 64 by 64, and I'm changing the items origin point to 32 by 32. That means the dot is in the middle. So when I create the items, I tell it go to the center of the slot. That way the item is always centered. And I could use bigger items or smaller items that it will always send it to the center. Anyways, so you need the slots and you need the groupings. This is, I would say, like everything's important, right? Because this was 3 days of narrowing down everything. So it's like if you move one of the parts, everything else is going to break. This is clockwork, right? You can't just change one part. Everything else is going to break. So you need two groupings, depending on how many inventories you want to make. Like, if you want to do it like this, changing between two places, you're going to need two groupings. One for the normal items and one for the items equipped, right? You make a global group for your items and you put all your simple items on here. Then you're going to duplicate your items and you're going to give them a different name. In my case, I gave them the name EQ at the end to make a distinction. So you need two sets of the same item. This is good because this is going to make the distinction between the two inventories and you're going to make them go between them. So this part, it's all important. I keep wanting to say like this is important because I remember as I was making it, like how important every tiny little detail was. Right? So yeah, you have the two groupings. Put your items on there. Make sure the groupings are distinct, like items equipped. The items on the normal ones are just normal. The ones on the equipped, they say actually equipped or something to make the distinction. It's up to you. Now, next, the variables. Where's global variables? My eyes are really bad. Like really, really bad. I'm nearly blind, so give me a second. Where's variables again? Is that at the top, right? Oh my god. That's why I can see the scroll, god damn it. Alright. So variables. We have a bunch of variables. Let's go to the bottom. That's where the variables are. Right. So I told you before, if you're going to use your own variables to check if you have the item and if the item is equipped, you're going to have to make them yourself. Right? Just have item on a structure. Like have item and then the item and then the item is a number is a boolean like yes or no, right? And then equipped item and then your items and then it's a boolean yes or no, right? If we're going to use the GDevelop inventory system, that you don't have to do those, you just have to do these ones I'm going to show you, which is the main one. This is the one that keeps tally of everything. Item ID. It's a number, starts at 0. Very important. It's a number, starts at 0. Then you need a structure for your non-equipped items. So just call it non-equipped, whatever, normal items, doesn't matter what you call it. Then you name your items, and each item needs to be a number starting at 0. Put it in a structure. This will be important for resetting. It'll be easier. Then you need the exact same thing for the second inventory, because we're using 2, right? An equip ID that keeps track of everything. We call it, give it a number, starting at 0. Equip ID, right? And then you're gonna do the same thing. Like for the equipped items, you make a structure, name of the items. It's a number variable starting at 0, right? It's the exact same thing, right? You just need to make 2 of them, and make sure you make enough of a distinction so you know in your head which one's which. Main variable that keeps track of who comes and goes. And the second variable, this is the memory. This is the variables that are going to store the memory. I suppose I should have started with that. This one gives the number. This one gives the ticket, tells the item, where do you go? And it keeps track of who's coming and who's going, like +1, subtract 1, +1, subtract 1. It's this one. This one's the memory. This is the one where the item passes on the ticket information, their position, their seat, passes on to this one. Right. Hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. This is the best I can do, right? Right. So the inventories, the actual events, where is it? Main game code? Yeah. Inventory is the reset. Start with a magic sword. Right. I'm going to zoom out. And if you want, you can just copy this. Right? Pause the video. Sorry. It's 1080p. Pause the video. Copy it. Study it. Do whatever you want if you don't understand. Right? All of this stuff, the order it's in, it's all crucial. If you change the order of any of this, it's over, right? It's gonna break. Except for this one. This one I changed because it made sense in my head. There you go. Back where it's supposed to. So yeah. You only need to do this once. I know it's a lot of coding, it's a lot of programming, but you only need to do this once. After you do this once, you can just copy paste it and make new items, and everything's going to work. So let me just quickly run through the whole thing. We have 2 sets, right? Remember, it's the whole 2 inventory things. They're going on at the same time. It's always checking, is it this one or this one? It's always checking, like, is it inventory not equipped or inventory equipped? That's why you have these ones, the distinctions. You picked up the item, right? You told the game you have the item. You opened your inventory. The very first thing it's going to check is going to be this one, right? All right, not this one, sorry. The bottom ones. This is the first one it's going to check. So this one, yeah. So it's going to check, like, do you have the item? Yes. Is the item equipped? No. Is the item in memory? Remember, this is the variable that says it's in memory. It's not, because it's a 0. And then this variable, which I didn't explain, you can just change it for is the layer showing, right? This is what's locking this from happening multiple times. And this as well. These 2 are locking this, right? This variable, you can change it for is the scene showing. This is important, like, because you only want this stuff to happen when you're actually looking, not the scene, the layer, when you're actually looking at the layer. So you can change this for is layer showing or whatever. If not, okay. When I press the button that makes the armory show up, that inventory where all the items are, I just have this thing, this action that changes this show dot armory from 0 to 1. And when I close it, it changes from 1 to 0. Basically, I'm doing the action is the layer showing no, then do this, right? Whatever. This should be simple. This is the easy part, right? Um so we're going to change the global variable. This is the tally one. This is the main one. We have the item. The item's not equipped. Is the item in memory? No. Are we looking at the layer? Yes. Then we're going to add one to the main one, to the one that takes the tickets out with the seats. And it's going to go, it's going to take the first ticket, right? It's going to go from 0 to 1, right? And then it's going to create the item, like the item just walked in, and it hands him over the ticket. And the item picks up the ticket and goes, oh, I'm number 1, right? So we're changing the object variable ID. We call it ID to make it simple. And we're changing that variable to the same number as the ticket, as the main variable that keeps track of all the tallies, right? This is only happening once, right? That's the important thing. This part doesn't update all the time. This only updates once. And if you don't know, you don't need to go to Magic Sword, for instance, and go to the variables and then add a variable and then type in a variable ID. It's a number and yada, yada, yada. You don't need to do that. That's only if you want to declare it at the start. You can leave that empty. You don't need to create the variables. You just create the variable right here by telling it to do this. Change the global variable, change the object number variable ID, and by putting ID, you're giving it the name. You tell it the object, and then you tell it the number, and it just creates it right here, right? So don't go putting variables on all your items. You don't have that. That you don't have to do that. It's a lot of work. Right. So again from the beginning. Sorry. The item's coming up, right? It just checked. Is it equipped? No. Do you have the item? Yes. Is it in memory? No. So it takes a ticket. The ticket's number 1. It creates the item. The item walks in, right? It passes it on the ticket, and the item goes, oh, I'm number 1, right? We create the variable ID on the object, and we put it the same as that one, the ticket. So the object now knows, oh, I'm number 1. But then, so the object don't forget, we're going to place it in memory. This is the variable that puts it in memory, right? The not EQ, not equipped ID dot magic sword thing on the structure. And we're going to make this variable the same as the object variable that's specific to this variable, right? So these ones are all interchange, right? If this makes sense in your head, if this part makes sense in your head, that's it. That's like half the battle. The item's coming in. This guy takes a ticket, passes it on, and goes, dude, you're number 1. The item's like, cool, I'm number 1. And then passes it on to memory. It's like reminding itself, right? Dude, I'm number 1. Dude, I'm number 1. Brain, remind me later. The brain's like, it's okay, cool. Dude, it's cool. You're number 1. And then we play the sound. This is just so I know what's happening. You don't need to play the sound. So now we have the item. The tally's 1. The item knows it's number 1, and it's in memory knowing that it's number 1. Cool. This only happened once. This can't happen multiple times because otherwise the tally just keeps going up. So then the item's like, okay, I have a ticket. I'm number 1. Where do I go? Where's my seat? That happens here in the bottom. Slot order and equipped. This is the easy part, right? Again, you check, am I looking at this layer? Is the layer open? Do I need to update now? Yes, it's 1. You can, again, change this for a different condition. Um, and then it's going to check all the items under the group items that you created earlier. It's going to check all those items, see if they have a variable called ID, and it's going to check what number that variable is. And if it's 1, it's going to send them, change their position to slot 1, center X, so on, slot 1, center Y. If it's number 2, it's going to go to slot number 2. It's going to change all the items with that number to slot number 2, which is only 1 item if everything's working right. Slot number 3, if it's number 3, and so on, and so on, and so on. By the way, it's the exact same thing for the equipped ones, Right. Oh, and this is just like, if we're not looking at the scene, the layer, we just delete everything. That was just so I make sure that it works when changing scenes. Right. So you have an item. The item has a ticket. The guy that passed on the ticket knows which number it is. The item stored it in memory, like, dude, I'm number 1. I'm number 1. I'm on seat number 1, right? And then you use the item. So it goes all the way to the top, right? You click the item. If the item is not equipped or not in use or whatever you want it, then we're going to set the item to equipped if that's what you want to do. And we just change the global variable item ID, and we're going to subtract 1. So it's like now the item just left the room. So he was sitting in the room, seat number 1, right? And then the number was called, right? And the guy who's taking the tickets is very smart. Like, he's a savant, right? He keeps track. He's like counting cards. He's going like +1, +1, -1, -1, +1, -1, +1, +1, -1, right? And if the guy just left the room, then you don't need to keep adding the number until it's like a stupid number, right? You don't need to keep like, oh, the next one's coming in. I'm going to take another ticket, and now it's like number 533, right? No, he's like he's keeping track. He's like, okay, if that guy went down, then the people in the room are like, if there's 3 people in the room and he just took down 1, now there's 2 people in the room, right? That's what this is doing. So now we subtracted 1 from the guy keeping the tally. And then we delete the magic sword. Then we check as a sub event. So this happens only when you do this action, when you do this condition, like only when you press the button does it do all of this stuff, right? So it's going to check all the items in the group items and see if their ID in memory, because you just deleted the item. And the moment you delete the item, the object variable is gone. Because if there's no item, there's no object variable. If there's no object, there's no object variable, right? So we check the one in memory before we update the memory, right? Because otherwise it's going to be 0. So we check all the items under the group. We check if they have a variable called ID. We check which number that number is, that ID is. And then we check if it's bigger than the object we just deleted that's in memory. So if the item is after the magic sword, right? If you have the magic sword in the middle and the magic sword is number 2 and the wooden shield is number 3, it goes after, right? When you delete the item or you equip it or whatever, right? when you update it, you get rid of the magic sword, and then the wooden shield now is number 3, right? So he's like, oh, wait, there's a vacancy next to me. So it's going to subtract 1 from his ID. It's like he just scribbled on the ticket, right? That he's holding. It's like, oh, I'm holding a number 3, and it's like, oh no, but there's a vacancy next to me now. So he scribbles it and he puts a number 2 on it, and he changes the seat to get closer to the entrance, right? Or whatever. So that's what's happening. And then, since we we no longer have the magic sword in that specific inventory, then we update it to 0. It's no longer in that room, right? It just exited the room, so it no longer has a place. We put it to 0. This stuff makes sense in my head. I'm sorry if it doesn't on yours. I'm sorry if it's like, oh, dude, this is too complicated. So now it's the opposite, right? Because it's equipped. Now everything's at 0 regarding this item, and the item is now equipped. So you now have the item, and the item is equipped, and it just entered the new room called the equipped items. So it's going to do the whole thing all over again. So if the first loop made sense to you, the second loop is exactly the same. Because you have the item, and the item is equipped. Is the item in memory? No, you just got into the new room. Are you looking at the layer? Yes. Then it's going to do the same thing. The guy at the door is like, oh, okay, welcome, you're number 1. And then we create the magic sword, and the magic sword is like, oh, okay, I am number 1 again. Thank you, I'm so cool. And then he's like, okay, let's see if I remember. So he tells his brain like, dude, remind me later, I'm number 1. The brain's like, okay, cool. And then we play the sound. And then it does the exact same thing. Like, it checks, okay, which ticket am I? What am I looking at? There we go, slots. Dequipped. Then it does the exact same thing. It's like, dude, where am I? Okay, I'm number 1, so where's my seat? Oh, it's this one, right? I hope that made sense. And then it's just a loop. Everything else that comes after it's a loop. So what is the difference? And what is this thing at the bottom? So this thing at the bottom, so how can I explain this? All of this stuff, for this to like work properly, all of this stuff only updates once. One time, and that's it. You only update it when you tell it to, when you want it to. This thing at the bottom is always updating the memories. This is what's keeping the memories always knowing where they are, like what's going on. Basically, these are the item variables, the object variables, and they're constantly reminding themselves, their memories, where they are. And this is always happening for as long as you're looking at that layer. If the layer is closed, then they disappear and they stop reminding them, right? And that's why this needs to be in the bottom. Sorry. Because remember, when you delete the item, it becomes 0. And you don't want that. You only want it to be 0 if you tell it to be 0, not because you just deleted it. And if this is not in the bottom, then, or if this is constantly updating, then it's going to tell the memories, like if you close the layer and you delete the items, it's going to go like, oh, dude, I'm number 0, when it's not, right? So this is what's keeping the memory going. This is why when you change this at the top, like you just change the object variables, and then you subtract 1, right, from the object variables, and then the object variable is gonna update the memory. This is where the updating keeps happening. What else? Right. So you did everything you wanted to do, right? You equipped the items, you got the items, whatever, right? And then you closed it. And now you reopened it. And this is where the distinction comes from. Sorry. It's between these four, right? So this is the not equipped inventory. This is the equipped inventory. This is the equipped inventory. This is not equipped inventory. It doesn't the order between these two. They're just like this because I copy pasted. It doesn't matter. This doesn't. It could be the same as the bottom one. But anyways, so when you open the layer, the very first check is something in memory. The very first check are these ones, which is, do we have the item? Yes. Is the item equipped? Yes. Yes or no, right? And then it's like, is the item in memory? Is it 0? Then it's these ones. Creates a new item, gives it a new number, gives it a new ID, does the new stuff. If the item is already in memory, if it's bigger than 0, it's this one. If the item in memory is bigger than 0, right? If you already have one, if it's stored in memory, then it uses these ones. And these ones, all they do is create the item when the layer is showing. Again, this is very important. When it creates the item, and then it reminds the item with the variable in memory which seat you're supposed to go in. So it recreates the object variable, and it gives them the number that they have in memory. This is where the memory part comes from, the saving part. This thing is locking this stuff from creating multiples of the same one. So if the number of this item, magic sword right now, living in a scene is less than 1, then it creates 1 and then stops creating, right? This is what's locking this thing from constantly triggering. If you're thinking why not use trigger once? Because trigger once kind of sucks. Because it's specific, sorry, to that occasion. It's not global. It's like if you change the scene and the only thing stopping that variable from adding is a trigger once, it's going to trigger again. Because trigger once, as I found out, it's not global. Global variables, on the other hand, they are. That's why locking stuff from occurring multiple times behind a global variable is so much better. Because global variables only change when you tell them to change. Trigger once triggers every time you change the scene. That's a very important distinction. Anyways, let's move on because this is getting long again. So that was the whole thing. If that doesn't make sense, just copy paste it. You'll be fine. Just copy the whole thing. You only need to do this once. Let me show you why. Oh, and by the way, the whole inventory is just an item. You start with it. Just make one item. Then you make the slots thing. One for the equipped, one for the non-equipped. And by the way, as you can tell, I forgot to mention this because this should be obvious. When the item is equipped, right? That's the difference. If it's not equipped, then we create the regular item. If the item is equipped, then we create the equivalent EQ at the end, right? Magic sword EQ. So we delete the regular one, and if the item is equipped, we create the equipped one. If we delete the equipped one and we go back to being unequipped, then we create the non-equipped ones. And again, with the distinction between the EQ ID, which is the equivalent of ID when it's not equipped, and the other grouping, the items EQ. It's the exact same thing, right? It's just we change one for the other when we change between the two. Right. So the whole inventory is this. It's slots and one item. That's all you need to do. Is you make the slots and you make the item. You make all that stuff, right? And then if you want to make more, you just copy paste it. Let me show you that. You copy it. Right. So Control C. Then you go, which one's empty? Okay, this one's empty. You go to a different event sheet, one that's mostly empty, one that you're not really using. Like this one has the external events. This doesn't matter. You can have these. You can have these. Sorry for the accent. I'm not Russian or German. I'm Portuguese. So you paste this right here. Then you're gonna go here in the corner, the magnifying glass. Press that. Let me move this. And then the top one, you put in the same that you have right now, right? Magic sword. That's why naming is so important. Magic sword. And then the bottom one, the one to replace, you put an item that you already have. In my case, golden armor. It's one of the other items that I have. And then you click replace. Found 10 results, change 10. There you go. Golden armor. It changed everything that it said magic sword and replaced it for golden armor. Right? And then you just copy paste or cut and paste. Let me zoom out. My eyes are really bad. Like really, really bad. And then you just paste it. There you go. You have an extra item. Just like that. Now you just need to make the condition that says like, oh, when you do this, it gives the item to you. Other than that, the item's done. That's all you need. Okay. What about the resetting? The resetting, it's easy. It's going to be the last thing. So the resetting, basically you're just deleting everything, right? So when you're looking at the layer and you press the button, doesn't matter what button, you're going to change the IDs, the ones that keep tally of who comes and goes, to 0. Set to 0, those two. And then this is why you want a structure to make things easy. You're going to change the global variables of your structures, and you're just going to type in the start, right? For instance, EQID. If you don't finish typing it, if you just put EQID, you're referring to all of the variables under EQID. If you finish it, if you put EQID dot golden armor, then you're referring specifically to change this variable. But if you just put it like this, without the dot something, then you're referring to all of them. And when you tell it to change to 0, you're going to change to 0 all of those variables at the same time. That's why structures are so good for this kind of stuff. Right? So you do the same for the equips and not equips. These are the memories, right? So you change the memories to 0. You put the tally back to 0, and you change the memories back to 0. And then you delete everything. Delete all the items that are equipped and all the items that are not equipped. Or the other way around. All the items not equipped and all the items equipped. And then right? So everything's 0. Even if you're looking at the layer, like everything's just got deleted. But it gets instantly recreated because you're looking at the layer and you do have the items, right? You're not telling the program remove the items. You're just deleting them, but you still have the items. So it's going to recreate them instantly using the very first step, right? It's going to check, do I have the items? Is it equipped? Do I not have the items? Is it equipped? Uh, is it in memory? Is it not in memory? It's going to do these ones all over again. So then what's the order? The order, because GDevelop runs stuff from top to bottom, it's this thing. The items, the way they show up here, this is going to be the order of sorting. So when you press the button and it deletes, then that's why it should be at the top. Then it's going to instantly recreate the items in order you program them, right? So if I go like, actually, Knight Sword should come first. So I just drag and drop Knight Sword. And now Knight Sword will be sorted to number 1 when I press the button. Then it's going to make Magic Sword. Then it's going to make this, and this, and this, and this. And it's going to make that in that order. Right. I don't think this explanation was any better than the last one. I just rambled on a whole bunch. I am very sorry. I'm very, very sorry. But I don't know. I can't explain this better because it's so complex, right? It's such a whole thing. This took me so long of like, how do I update? How do I not update? How do I keep things in memory? How do I change the memory? How do I make it always work the way it's supposed to, right? This is like, you can't go like 3 days of work and then go, I want to make it simple. Just making it like 2 words. You can't. Given I'm not explaining this in the best of ways, and I don't really have the time to make all sorts of like editing stuff. So I just hope this makes sense. Just look at this, copy this. Hopefully it makes sense. Make sure of the little details. Make sure of the, which item is being created. If it's the normal one, if it's the one with EQ in the end, because the item is equipped. So you should make the distinction between the 2 items and treat it like it's 2 different inventories. All that kind of stuff. And then you can just make like separate stuff that says like, oh, if this item is equipped, then something happens in the game, right? That's how I have stuff. How can I show you? That should be the easy part, right? That should be the really simple part. I'm trying to think of like an easy one. See, there's a lot of like disabled experiment things. Right, that's cursor. Wait, it happens before this. I think there's an easy one under enemies. Yeah, like Mage's Head. Like repeat for every instance of enemies, and then it checks the global variable equipped dot magic head. This is the old variables, so I'll change this for the GDevelop inventory system. So I'll make it check if this item was equipped with the GDevelop inventory stuff. And then if enemies are alive, then change the global variable current mana, add this number, and then change the thing. So when you kill an enemy, you get 15% mana back if the item is equipped. See, this part is so simple. right? Making the items actually do stuff is so easy. See, all you do is repeat for every enemy. If they're dead, if you have the item, when they when you kill them, when they're dead, it gives you 15% mana back, and then it updates the bar. Cool, right? This one's easy. This one's really so simple. Like the items actually doing stuff, that's the really easy part. It's like making the inventory go back and forward. That's the really hard part. Like you have the what's a different one? Like bandit sword is the same thing. Like if you have the item, see, it's so simple. I could go through this in like 2 seconds. Uh, damage triggers, slashing. Where's dash? Oh, dash damage. There you go. See, this one's really cool as well. I'm gonna make a video on this one. So again, like if this is true, like we have the enforcer shield equipped, then it wow. Actually, this one's kind of big. Let me see the whole thing. Whoa, this one's actually really big. I don't remember it being this big. Enforcer shield. But this one's so cool, right? Uh I mean I'm saying right, but you have no idea what's going on, right? Oh, it's because right, it's big because it's checking for crits. So the and then it's doing the whole numbers thing. That's why it looks so big. It's because it's doing both. Like it's checking if the item is equipped, then it's checking like if the crit chance is 0, then just do this. But if you actually have crit chance, then it's gonna check if you dealt a crit or not, and then it's gonna do the whole thing, right? That's why it looks so big. I was like, wait, what? I don't remember this. It's like, okay. But yeah, Enforcer Shield is really cool. Uh, it's really cool because the way it works, because it works with tagging damage. And that's because of trigger once and all this nonsense, right? Because it's like it's piercing damage. What it does is when you dash through an enemy, it does damage. That part's easy. The hard part is when the enemies are on top of each other and you need to check for collision. Because if you're colliding with a bunch of enemies at the same time who are the same enemy, if you just copy paste them, they're just different instances. Even if you tell it, oh, for each object, it's still gonna trigger the if it's in collision with this enemy, right? And so you need to find different ways of locking the triggers. And I tried a whole bunch of shit, and it didn't work. Like trigger one, do this, do that, so on. So then I came to the conclusion of doing object variables as like a tagging system, and it works perfectly, and it's so cool. I love the way it works. Well, in a geeky way, like numbers. I can explain that one as well. It's really simple to explain, but I'll do it in a different video. Anyways, I was saying inventory is the hardest part. As long after you do the whole inventory thing, then everything else is going to be so much easier. Like so much easier. Oh, man. Anyways, I hope that was a better explanation. This I was thinking like how can I explain this better? And I can't. Cuz there's so much like back and forward. It's so clockwork in the way everything needs to go. At least in my head, the way I see things. Right. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. And I'll check you guys out on a different video. All right, you can look at OBS and all this. I'm going to do zero editing because I got work to do. Right. Peace out.